We're going to talk about Sir Keir Starmer and what a week he has had already. He decided that basically he was going to launch himself today at a new anti-woke agenda. He says that the Tories are making a big mistake. He reckons that everybody is, for some particular reason, making stuff up. Keir Starmer has lashed out at the Conservatives. He's accusing them, basically, of stoking the culture wars against charities such as the RNLI. Addressing a civil society summit, the Labour leader also defended woke bosses at the National Trust, which has faced a revolt after linking the buildings to the slave trade and attempting to force volunteers to wear gay pride rainbows on lanyards.
Instead of seeing this as a model that should inspire us and drive us forward, the Tories seem set on sabotaging civil society to save their own skin. They've got themselves so tangled up in culture wars of their own making that instead of working with Royal National Lifeboat Institution, an organisation the late Queen was patron of for 70 years, to find real solutions to stop the small boats, their rhetoric has helped demonise them. Instead of working with the National Trust, so more people can learn about and celebrate the culture and our history, they've managed to demean their work. In its desperation to cling on to power at all costs, the Tory party is undertaking a kind of weird McCarthyism, trying to find woke agendas in the very civic institutions they once regarded with respect.
So Starmer's basically saying that everybody's making up all this woke nonsense and it doesn't really exist. The National Trust has never, ever produced a calendar that didn't have Christmas in it. Absolutely, the RNLI have never sent money abroad to help causes which some people might be a bit surprised that they're helping. And they've absolutely never, ever gone into French waters to rescue some migrants who didn't need rescuing so they could bring them to Dover. That's all made up, isn't it? Of course it is. To discuss this, I'm joined by Deputy Policy Director of the Centre for Social Justice, Sophia Worringer, and Director at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Mr Mark Littlewood. Welcome to both of you. I mean, I'm not quite sure what Keir Starmer's on about here. He's making out that all of this woke stuff is being dreamed up by Tory party MPs who have been attacking the RNLI and the National Trust. Now, I don't know who he's talking about. There might be one or two Tory MPs having a go, but it's not as if, I mean, it's more likely that I'd be having a go at it. And why is he having a go at me? You know, he probably knows better. But, you know, I don't know that there is this concerted Tory attack squad going around having a go at these great British institutions.
I don't think there is, but I think the fact that he is wading into this so-called culture war on these issues and using these institutions, he's doing the same thing that he's accusing his opposition of doing, which is weaponising institutions which are beloved and held dearly by many people across the country. But I think what he is tapped into, and I do think that is a good thing, is understanding the importance that these charitable civic organisations play in our community life. And he's realising, with the looming fear and hope of a potential government coming into his hands, that actually there is a limit to what government can do. And these institutions like the National Trust and like the RNLI and other civic institutions and small charities across the country actually have a huge role to play. And there's a limit to what government can do. And he's saying, welcoming that. Whereas previously the Labour Party has been saying maybe government can do it all. He's now saying we need to roll back on that and explain and understand and appreciate what these small charities actually do.
Yes, I mean, what's interesting is it seems to me, Mark, that what he's saying is he's putting these charities in the same box as the NHS. You know, don't criticise it. You mustn't criticise it because, look, the Queen used to be the patron and everybody loves them and they're really great and they do really amazing things. So if you want to be critical of them, then you must just be a horrible Tory bastard.
That seems to be the underlying message, doesn't it? But look, Mike, you said just a moment ago that there doesn't appear to be some coordinated Conservative...
I don't think so. I've not seen it.
But there probably should be.
Yeah.
The number of these institutions, the National Trust, I know rather more about than the RNLI. I know some of the people involved in the Restore Trust movement who want the National Trust to get back to its
Because there is a row going on within the organisation, isn't there?
And we heard on your clip Keir Starmer saying, why are people decrying the National Trust? Why don't we help it celebrate our national heritage? Increasingly, the National Trust doesn't celebrate our national heritage. It apologises for our national heritage. So
it's also literally rewriting history, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
love that.
Or certainly focusing on elements of history where there's a belief that Britain should apologise rather than feel proud. And I think there is a trend of these institutions being captured by a particular ideology rather than being neutral, valuable pillars of civil society.
Yes.
And if that is the way that it's happening, if these groups are becoming politicised in some way or another, then I think it should be called out. And really, the best way to be a charity in these sort of areas is to stick very rigorously to your lane, to focus on what you're really good about, and not to widen into some wider cultural war or political battle.
Which is exactly what's been going on in all sorts of places, including, I would say, the civil service.
Yeah, although I think those charities, maybe the majority of what they do is still true to their original mission. And obviously the RNLI, their first purpose is to save lives. And I don't think the majority of them are going out intentionally crossing into French waters. And even if they are, their purpose is to save lives. Their purpose is not to kick up a fuss.
They are taking people from boats which are not sinking, putting them on their boats and bringing them to this country, which is an actual illegal act. People have said to me in the past, what's the difference between what they're doing and what lorry drivers used to inadvertently do when they jumped in the back of their lorries on the continent and then came here illegally? Because the lorry drivers used to get prosecuted, even if they didn't know they were in there.
But you have to remember the RNLI is almost exclusively made up by volunteers. And those individuals who are manning the boats are doing a lot of very important work within British waters.
Sure.
The majority of what they do is incredibly important and must be supported.
No,
and
I
if
get
they're
that.
volunteers, then there's a limit to how much the charity can control their actions.
Isn't this the point, Sophia, that in many ways, and I'd even say much of what the National Trust does is good, but the problem is when you sprinkle a bit of wokery on the top of what was otherwise a pretty tasty cake, the cake starts to taste pretty foul to most people. So again, stick to those core principles of what your charity is trying to do. And that way, I don't think they need to be part of a Labour versus Conservative debate. People from all sides can just, celebrate them and be glad for their presence.
Right. But, I mean, I think we can all agree that the wokery does exist. It's not as though he's basically trying to make out that this is all being invented by the Tories. And if it wasn't for them, there wouldn't be any of these conversations going on. When, in fact, everybody's talking about wokery now because people are sick to death of it. Because it happens everywhere they go. Whether there's a, rainbow zebra crossing suddenly emerges in the middle of town, whether there's, some ridiculous BBC drama where they've had to make sure that every single possible minority is represented. They couldn't possibly do Doctor Who anymore as a bloke. Oh, no, he must have some kind of transgender issue going on and maybe try a woman once in a while. It doesn't stop. And for Keir Starmer to make out that it's been invented by the Tories, it's kind of bizarre, particularly if he's trying to appeal to the red wall, most of whom hate wokery.
It is disingenuous, also particularly when he then brings attention to it and stokes up the divide, which he's supposedly so against. So that, I don't think, is something that he should be pursuing because he needs to get on with the business of presenting himself as a very sensible future government leader. And the fact that he's picking on these very small things, which are not, as you say, government policy at all. He should be criticising the government for their policy and their proposals, not for something that he's made up that is actually something that the charities are responsible for.
Exactly right. And again, this whole attitude, as I mentioned, that, you mustn't criticise things because they're so great and inspirational and brilliant. Well, it's such a bizarre way of looking at the world, isn't it?
Well,
Next it'll be don't criticise the Labour Party because, we were formed to help the working man and woman of this country.
Yeah, I think that's actually what worries me about this sort of culture wars, wokery, more than anything else, Mike. It's not that some people have rather different takes on history or on the past or on Britain than I do. It's that it's becoming increasingly dissuaded for people to express their honest opinions, right? I bet there are a lot of people out there who agree, Mike, with your view of the world, but don't have a job where they feel they can express it.
No.
And that's what I object to most. I don't mind Keir Starmer having these views. And by the way, I just wonder whether this is a taste of the politics to come. There's not much difference between the economic policy of the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. There is some, but it's a cigarette paper or two. This could be the big defining difference in politics, your take on culture in the years to come.
Yes, I think so, because, we've heard Rishi Sunak talk about some of the things he will do. I mean, I know that he quite often says he's going to do things that don't end up happening. But, I mean, he talks about, sort of complicating the world of this country and making sure that people can't be stopped from doing things just because somebody doesn't like it.